I grew up in a neighborhood that didn't have many kids. There were only some teenagers across the street who would humor me sometimes, and the two sisters next door. At a glance, their house looked normal enough: a playhouse, a swing set, and an inflatable pool during the summer. The older of the two girls, we'll call her Jill, was my age, while her sister was 2 years younger than us. We'll refer to her as Mary. You could tell when they were playing outside that maybe they weren't the best kids to be hanging around with, but they were my only options for friends. You kinda have to make do. Jill and I were pretty close, but she would get angry for no apparent reason and end up shouting at me. I'd never really had any other friends though, so I just assumed it was normal. A few times, she would push me into the spiked part of her chain link fence, and I would wind up with bruises all down my back. But that was far from the worst of my problems. Jill had her anger issues, yes, but it was Mary who really concerned both me and my parents. More than once, I had found things in their house that belonged to me that had been locked in my shed, or worse, in my house. Some were even taken out of my bedroom. Luckily for me, my mom was really careful about this kind of stuff, and always wrote our last name on things so you would find it if you were looking. So I managed to get most of it back. It was summer, and I was about 9 when my mom was cleaning the tank that we kept my hermit crabs in. So I had them outside in a small travel tank. Seeing me outside, Jill and Mary asked me if I wanted to come and play. I'll admit, I was kind of a show-off back then, and felt that this was a perfect opportunity to boast about my neat pets. Jill had plans to go have lunch with her grandmother, so Mary and I were left alone. She had always given me a bad vibe, but as a kid, you tend to not pay very much attention to that. That's when my mom called over the fence and said that she had to run into work for about an hour, and I had to go with her. Mary offered to look after my hermit crabs while I was gone, and being the stupid kid that I was, I agreed. When I got back, there was only one crab in the tank. The other, Mary claimed had run away. In case you don't know, hermit crabs aren't exactly the fastest pet out there. And it wasn't until 2 years later that we were playing hide and seek, and I found the mutilated corpse of a hermit crab in their garage, lying next to the shell which had clearly belonged to me, along with the remains of the latest cat they had buried. As the years went on, things only got worse. My cats were both allowed outside, and one day we found one with a belt around her neck. I wanted to pretend that it wasn't Mary, but there were only so many glittery purple belts in the town. There are a lot of toads around, and when you're a kid in the 90s, finding one is the highlight of your week, especially for Mary, who was an avid Britney Spears fan. She was known for standing on her front porch and singing along to Toxic for hours on end. We found a toad in my mom's garden, and we had some tent stakes left outside, and Mary decided to help herself to one. What I saw still haunts my memory. She took the toad and stuck the tent stake down its throat while it was still alive, using it as a microphone. But she only sang louder, as though to drown me out. Eventually, she got bored and took the stake out. She said that this meant that the toad was dying, so she proceeded to bury it alive. My dad came out then, having heard my pleas when he realized what was going on. He told her to stop, and that she couldn't do that to an innocent animal, to which she replied, "I'll do whatever I want," and stomped on it. They moved out when I was in high school, and a new family lives in their house now. They're nice, a couple with 2 foster kids. The little boy had just turned 5, and we sometimes pay him to come over and leave some food on the porch for the cats when we went away for a weekend. When they first moved in, my mom was quick to try and make friends. I've always had pretty bad anxiety issues, so I wasn't very pleased when she made me too. I happened to mention the last people who lived in the house and noticed that my mom seemed to get a little uncomfortable at this. When we went back inside, my mom sat me down and said, since I was older, 16 at the time, and it didn't seem like it would be a problem anymore, that she had something to tell me. Turns out, when I was really little, Mary had actually been one to bite. This didn't surprise me much. I remembered it a bit. And there are a lot of kids that do that. But then she went on to ask if I remembered the incident with the shovel. I told her no, honestly wondering what the hell she was talking about. When I was about 5 and Mary was 3, she had found the spade of a broken metal shovel somewhere, probably in their garage. I had been playing with Jill in their yard that day, and Mom was shocked when she heard me screaming in terror, especially because I was always a quiet kid. When she looked, she saw Mary chasing me around, trying to slam the shovel over my head. We didn't know at the time, but I have a blood pressure condition which makes me get dehydrated extremely easily. And I was on the verge of losing consciousness by the time I finally screamed for help. She also told me that a couple of months prior, she'd run into their mother at the store, where she informed my mom that Mary had been sent to a home for mentally ill children, and that when she had lived at that home, she had kept a steak knife under her pillow in case Mary ever threatened her. I'm not sure why I didn't remember the shovel incident, be it because of my young age or trauma, but I do have vague memories of it now that my mom has told me, and now that I'm older, I'm less confused and more horrified as I think of all the pets that they had that died seemingly out of nowhere. I can remember at least 2 hamsters, 4 fishes, a dog, and 6 cats. I'm in college on the other side of the state now, but every so often, I'll see a post on social media from Jill. She never mentions her sister, but according to their mother, Mary still asks about me sometimes when they go to visit her. Sometimes when I'm at home, I'm afraid I'll look out the window and see her face, despite my bedroom being on the 2nd floor. I flinch every time someone pretends to throw something or take a swing at me, and hearing even joyful, playful screams makes my heart race. I'm a neurotypical psychology major, so I hate to paint the mentally ill people in a negative light or make them out to be subhuman monsters meant to be feared. I know a lot of people who suffer with mental illness, and they're some of the kindest, gentlest people I know. But every so often, there's one that breaks the pattern and lives up to all of the ableist stereotypes that you can think of.
For a little background, I'm a 27-year-old female, and I recently just moved into a nice apartment in a safe neighbourhood with my 2 dogs, Charles and Wigwam. Charles is a Corgi and German Shepherd mix, and is the most loving but overly obnoxious dog, while Wigwam is a last for Apso, who is quiet, sweet, and most definitely scared shitless of his own shadow. I have only been in my new place for about a month, and after this experience, I highly doubt I'm going to make it here for the duration of my 1-year long lease. The way these apartments are set up is that each floor has its own set of doors that lead to 4 apartments and a fire escape door that only opens from the inside. I'm on the backside of the building, which places my patio about 10ish feet from the fire escape stairs. I take my dogs out 3 times a day, midnight being the latest I will go out by myself, and every time I leave my apartment, I put the bar lock on my patio door and lock my front door without fail. About a week ago we had a snowstorm, and I cracked the patio door because, well, I love the cold weather, and I'm a fucking adult, so if I want to watch the snowfall, then I will do as I please. This was mistake number 1. I let my guard down because I'm a stubborn twat. It was around 11 PM and I decided that it was getting late, so I should probably take the dogs out for the night, and since they both hate the snow, it would be a quick trip. I go to lock the patio door and decide against it because I'm on the freaking 5th floor and I'm only going to be outside for a few minutes. I get the dogs ready, grab my keys and lock my door as I leave the apartment. I get down to the designated pet area with my beloved snow-hating dogs and let them do their thing, and then back to the apartment we go and we get back in safely. Or so I thought. This is where I thought I was losing my mind, but actually, shit was about to get real. As soon as we walk into the apartment, my dogs run over to the patio door and I notice the door is shut and the bar is locked. This was mistake number 2. I immediately think this is strange, but I didn't connect the dots. I go in the kitchen to get the dog treats, and both of my dogs start going absolutely crazy, growling at a large chest in my living room, and as I walk up to see what all the commotion is about, I see a pair of eyes creeping from under the chest lid. I stood there for about 5 seconds before I realised what I was seeing, and calmly walked backwards to my front door, opened it and told my dogs to go outside, and each of them ran out without their leashes on, and I immediately get myself into a car, lock the door and call the police. The police show up in less than 5 minutes, and they go up into my apartment, and after about 20 minutes, 2 officers are dragging out a 40-ish-year-old fucktard out of my building in cuffs, and this is where the plot thickens. This dude had been watching me since I moved in, and had been stalking out my place, waiting for an opportunity to get inside because he knew I lived alone. And if that's not creepy enough already, he had a fanny pack since it was still 1990, and he had a pocket knife, needles, ketamine, and a picture of me from the day I moved in, and his plan was to sneak in through my patio door, wait for me to fall asleep, and God knows what else. Needless to say, I didn't sleep for days because I thought he was going to come back. Luckily the bastard is still in jail, but I will never forget those eyes.
This happened to me a few years ago. I need to give you a few background details before I begin. My mother's from Ethiopia, and my father's a Mississippi native. I'm a few shades darker than most Caucasians, but sometimes people mistake me for white. At the time, I was living in the southernmost part of one of the reddest states in the USA, and just got a job as a toddler teacher at a daycare by my house. I love my job. The children were so well behaved and had the cutest little faces you could imagine. I've always been a sucker for the terrible ones that no teacher likes to deal with. Those are the ones with the most interesting personalities. I worked in the 1s and 2s room. I also taught after school, so I had my own separate class for the afternoons. There was this one little boy in particular named Daniel who always liked making trouble. He would fight with the other babies, unprovoked. He would pee on you on purpose while you changed him, and could start stripping at any random moment. Needless to say, Daniel was a handful. As I said before, I have a way with children that act out like this, and before long, Daniel was my little buddy. When a teacher couldn't handle him, he was sent to me, and he would do just fine. One day, when his father came to pick him up, he was with me in my class. I had seen his father pick him up plenty of times before, so I knew it was him. Although we had never spoke to each other before. I found him pretty attractive though. He reminded me of Wentworth Miller a little. So it completely caught me off guard when he said something along the lines of,
"Danny, what the hell are you doing in this nigger bitch's class?"
This completely caught me off guard because Although I'm in Deep South where racism is everywhere, I'd never experienced it at my job. All of the parents were glad to see me, and I had a good rapport with all of them. I didn't respond to his rude comment, however. I just got Daniel ready, and I was hoping he didn't want to do our secret handshake, which involved a series of hand claps and ended with us pressing our foreheads together and chanting, "I'm the best." Unfortunately, Daniel wouldn't leave until we did the entire handshake. I looked up, expecting his father to be highly upset, but he was just standing there, staring at me with the widest-eyed, toothiest grin that sent chills down my spine. Even Daniel looked up shocked, and then looked back at me. I stood up to say bye, and hopefully get him out of the classroom faster, but he stepped closer to me and put his hand on my shoulder and said,
"I like the way you handle my son."
The way he said handle made the whole statement sound very perverted. I remained professional and said, "Thank you, he is a joy to have around." And the next day, Daniel didn't come to school. This wasn't out of the ordinary either, because sometimes he went to daycare by his mother's house, which is further away. When I got to my desk, I noticed a red rose that had been spray painted black and had a piece of yarn around it, like a noose. Another time, I found a small wooden cross on the hood of my car with a lighter next to it. Things like this happened for a few weeks. One day, as the day came to a close after all the other employees had left and I had to close up, we had a huge ball pit in the back of the center that covered 50% of the entire classroom. I was wiping down the blocks when I heard the very familiar sound of someone jumping into the ball pit. I got up to investigate, thinking it was DJ McSqueak, our pet guinea pig who was notorious for escaping and jumping into the ball pit. I looked in the cage and, sure enough, DJ wasn't in there. I climbed into the pit and tried looking for him when I noticed a pair of legs in the ball pit. I immediately noped the fuck out of the room and screamed as I heard the roar of plastic balls behind me, indicating that whoever it was now chasing me. I ran into the next classroom and locked the door. I could see the man's face pressed up against the window, and I recognized Daniel's dad. He was screaming at me to open the door. I started frantically looking for a phone, but I couldn't find one. The main phone was in the office, and the handset that belonged to this classroom was missing. I eventually found the missing handset, but it was dead. I figured that this guy doesn't know that it was dead, and I pretended to call the police, and it worked. He had the angriest look on his face and stormed out of the center, and after I heard the door click, I sprinted to my classroom, locked the door, and called the police for real. They showed up about 10 minutes later, and I told them what had happened. Daniel's dad was later arrested and charged, but he was out of jail after a month.
I am 19 now. When I was in 8th grade, my parents split up and my mum got a cute little house downtown from our home. We would stay with my mum most nights, as it was my mum who took me and my older sister to school in the morning because my dad had to work early. My parents maintained an okay relationship for our sake. I never really liked the place because I hated change, and my mum was in a sort of bad state of mind, with the split and everything. She reconnected with a guy that she had a high school relationship with who had moved states. A few months into their long distance relationship, she went to visit him for a week. My sister and I stayed with my dad, but would stop by my mum's often to check on things and pick up stuff we might have forgotten. Anyway, a few months later, my mum breaks things off with him. Things are going as good as can get, I suppose. Then my mum started to act weird, like she was constantly looking over her shoulder, and just seemed like she was never really comfortable. There was one night where my mum was out with a friend. My sister and I, with our dad for the night, stopped by mum's place to grab something. The door was unlocked when we got there, which was weird. So naturally we called mum and asked her if she remembered locking it. She said yeah, we were in a rush so we were just like whatever, and let it go. Here's where it starts getting real weird. Our mum went out one morning to start her car, and there was a bouquet of what looked like really expensive flowers on her car. We asked what the hell all that was about, and she said she really didn't know. Maybe it was someone from work being flirty because they know she's newly single. We all thought it was weird, but what could we do about it? A few days later, my mum comes into my sister and I's room, and she asked us a really uncomfortable question that even I hate repeating. But she asked us if we moved her personal pleasure object from the top dresser drawer as a joke or something. We were like, what? Hell no. With that response, you can see my mum's face change into pure panic. My sister and I are like, can you please just tell us what the hell is going on? We obviously know something's up. She just brushes it off and tells us not to worry about it, and that everything is fine. So for a few days everything was really tense. My sister and I didn't really know what to make of all this. Obviously her extremely private possession is missing, and she has no idea why. Well, a few days later we're with my dad, and she calls and asks if he can keep us overnight. He said sure and asked what was going on. She told him what happened, and she said that when she had been scouring her bed for where it could have went, and she was checking the closet, she found a plastic grocery bag in the back of her closet with a pair of pants that she'd never seen before, with blood on them. She says they look like men's running pants. So she called the cops and told them everything that had been happening. The cops came, and while they were checking out the house, they found that one of the windows in the basement was busted from the outside. Nothing ever happened after that. My mum said they didn't really take it very seriously. We moved out there a few months later because my parents rekindled their relationship. I'll never forget that period of time, because it was easily the weirdest stuff I've ever dealt with. It's safe to say I didn't sleep well for a while, and I still don't know what happened.
So a few years back, during my senior year of high school, my stepdad made a very poor decision. His decision has caused a lot of pain and suffering for my mom and I, and we're both still in counseling for PTSD and anxiety disorders, Just for a little context, my parents got divorced when I was 7 years old. I'm also a female, if that matters to anyone. I was used to them dating other people, and I was actually very happy for my mom when she told me that she had met somebody new, until I met him. As soon as I met this guy, we'll call him Don, I had a horrible feeling in my gut. Don was originally from Florida, and he moved to Kentucky right before he met my mom, leaving behind his ex-wife and son. He was a weirdo in every sense of the word, always trying to start an argument over petty topics, or walked around shirtless with his strange nipple rings out, while my friends were over. Although he was weird, he was never threatening or abusive at all towards me or my mom. That is, until one night right before my mom's birthday. I remember this night clearly. It was my best friend's birthday, and I was waiting for her to come and pick me up to go to dinner. My mom and Don also had plans to go out and watch the UK-Florida basketball game. As an only child, my mom has always been very protective over me, so she wanted to wait until I left with my friend before she left with Don. This, for whatever reason, really pissed Don off, and he stormed out of the house without her. I left shortly after. I returned around 4 or 5 hours later, and the game had been over for some time, and Don had not come home yet. My mom acted very weird and nervous when I asked about him, and just ushered me off to go to sleep. As I was sleeping, I was woken up by my mom screaming my name, obviously disorientated, I groped around for my phone, thinking I had overslept and was late for school. When I checked the time, it was near midnight, and my mom screamed my name again and told me to shut the door and call 911. This is when shit pretty much hit the fan. I started freaking out and jumped up to slam my door and lock it. Right as I did this, 3 gunshots flew through my bedroom door, barely missing me. I grabbed my phone and jumped to the other side of the bed and laid on the ground, hoping to avoid any more bullets. I barely had time to get out my address and inform them that someone was trying to kill me before I heard my mom one last time before 2 more gunshots rang out. Everything fell silent, and I had a horrible feeling that someone had just murdered my mom. I got up from the floor when I heard the person begin to throw themselves against my door in an attempt to break it. All that was running through my mind was getting to my mom and staying alive. Eventually, he broke down my door, and I was horrified to see that it was my stepdad. His eyes were glazed over as he grabbed me by the shirt collar and pointed the barrel of the gun towards my head. I screamed and fought as he said over and over,
"Is this what you wanted?"
At this point, a lot of details got hazy as I had a ridiculous amount of adrenaline pumping through me, but I somehow managed to back him up and push him down onto my bed. I used both my hands to hold his hand with the gun away from me and tried with all my might to get it up against his head so I could blow his brains out. We struggled like this for a while until my mom came in, gunshot wound to the neck and stomach. Gunshot wound to the neck and stomach, and laid across the gun while telling me to run. I hysterically ran out the front door and up the street to my neighbors. I scared them half to death, but I was able to redial 911 and tell them exactly what had happened. As I was at my neighbor's, my mom was still in my room with my stepdad. She said that this was when she became very weak from blood loss and rolled off of him onto the ground. All she could do was ask why he was doing this, and he simply put the gun in his mouth. She took this opportunity to run out the front door right into the arms of a police officer. In the end, the police ended up having a standoff with Don as he barricaded himself inside. He made the mistake of pointing a gun at them, and they blew half of his dick off, and then arrested him. He's currently serving 45 years in prison, and to this day will give no reason as to why he decided to do this to us. In all honesty, I don't really care. My mom and I lived through it, and I've grown much closer because of it. We actually got matching tattoos reading, "Strength comes from the madness we survive."